Hey everyone, welcome back to Ladies Leading Live. We are in week 5, and this week we are the competency of intuition. This is my favorite competency to talk about, and I think that it's a little bit of a different take on competencies in comparison to maybe some of the competencies we've talked about up to this point. So, up to this point, we've talked about self-advocacy, self-awareness, courage, and resilience. And the thread that I think weaves through the 4 of those is that these are things that women need to strengthen. These are maybe things that aren't necessarily inherently our nature, and that these are things that we have to work on to strengthen in our own abilities. Maybe these are things that men are more socialized to do more naturally, but women have to actually work on these because of the ways society raised us. Intuition's a little bit different, and I want to start by sharing with you a little bit about what we heard and what popped out to us in some of the interviews that we did with the women that we talked to. There was this moment really early on in this series. I think I was talking to Anna Galladay, and she kept saying, listen to your heart, listen to your inner voice, listen to what the voice inside your head is telling you. And I didn't think much of it at the time. And I thought, oh, this is an interesting perspective. It was one of the things that we highlighted in her episode, was this idea of trusting your gut and listening to your inner voice. And then we started to hear it from a lot of the women that we talked to, this idea of listening to their inner voice, listening to their gut, trusting their gut, listening to their heart. And we started to really see that this was a theme that we were hearing from the women we were talking to. And this theme emerged, and it emerged in a really strong way. And when we started this journey to identify core competencies for female leaders, we didn't start out looking for core competencies. We just started out looking for if there was anything any of these women had in common based on the things they were saying about their journey. What emerged was core competencies, but this one was a little bit different. What emerged was a lot of stuff that women maybe weren't taught to do, or maybe aren't normally good at in the workplace. But this intuition piece, when we really started to look at this stuff and really started to try to want to understand intuition, it emerged in this really cool way. So I started to do a lot of research about intuition and started to do a lot of digging into this idea of intuition. Like, is this a real thing? Is this scientifically proven? Is this something that's good? And here's what I've learned. We all know that the business world, the government, in a lot of systems that exist in our culture today, were mostly created by white, wealthy, Christian, straight men. And some people would call that patriarchy. Some people would call that other things. For the sake of this, we'll call it a patriarchal environment, an environment designed for and by white men. We know that business functions a lot in that regard. It functions because it was created by white men. Women weren't at the table when businesses were created. Women weren't at the table when government was created. And so our voices were absent, and our strengths and skills weren't necessarily always represented. That doesn't mean that they were totally unrepresented, but it does mean that, the common themes among how men think about the world and how men approach problems and how men communicate are represented in the way that business and the world works. What we have learned from that is that because of that, the business environment tends to value logic and data and statistics and reports and facts and news and those sort of things. And that is because that is the way the business world has worked. It is because of the way that men designed it. That happens because there's a bunch of research that exists that says that men's brains are wired that way, that they're wired to value logic and data, that they're wired to connect to logic and data more than maybe women's brains are. I don't know what that means. That doesn't mean men don't have the ability to have intuition, and that doesn't mean that women don't have the ability to value logic and data. It just means that naturally their brains work differently. I would argue, if you're talking to me, that that all has to do with culture and socialization. But I'm not a scientist, so it's hard to say. So we know that the business environment values logic and data. Well, and that the science says that that's the way that men's brains are wired. What's interesting is that the science says that women's brains are wired for intuition. They're wired to trust their gut. They're wired to pick up on nonverbal social cues, both internally and externally. And that women are significantly better at sort of the intuition piece, and our brains are wired for the intuition piece more than men are. That doesn't mean men can't have intuition, and again, that doesn't mean women can't value logic and data, but it means that we're socialized in those ways. But because women work in patriarchal environments that were created by men that value logic and data, intuition isn't valued as highly in the workplace as logic and data is. And I find that really significant. I find that really important for us to sort of draw light to, because I think that this is a place, number one, where women have inherent value of something that we are inherently better at than men, that is significantly lacking from the business, government, whatever environment, the patriarchal environments. And so this is something we uniquely and innately bring to the table that maybe we don't have to strengthen. But what women are taught from a really young age, and particularly as we enter the world, is that when you say, I'm going to trust my gut on this one, or I'm going to follow my heart on this one, or I'm going to listen to my intuition on this one, people look at you cross-eyed because they want you to look at the data and the reports and the statistics and the facts, and they want you to look at all of that stuff instead of this intuition piece. And so I think that intuition is this really cool opportunity for women to to bring value to the workplace, for women to do something that is innately theirs, like trusting their gut and following their heart, more so than maybe men do. And I think that as we look at the business environment today, and as we look at what our society needs, it may be a little bit more of our intuition and a little bit less of data and logic and facts. And quickly, I want to sort of define for you, I found this really great article. A woman wrote about this idea of intuition. And there's this really great definition of what intuition really is. And I want to just sort of share that with you. So researchers define intuition as our brain's ability to draw on internal and external cues in making rapid, in-the-moment decisions, an important skill, particularly in high-stress situations. Intuition often occurs outside of our conscious awareness, and it relies on our brain's ability to instantaneously evaluate both internal and external clues and make a decision based on what appears to be pure instinct. So it's not necessarily that we are making things based on what our gut is telling us. It's that we unconsciously have the ability to evaluate internal and external cues and make decisions based on those cues that we're receiving that look like gut instinct, but maybe aren't necessarily actually gut instinct. It's that we're reading things a little bit more in tune to nonverbals. We're reading things a little bit more in tune to what's not being said, energy, attitude, body posture, all of those things that maybe our male counterparts aren't as in tune to because they're focused on the reports and the data and the logic. And when I looked at this and when this theme really started to emerge of intuition, I was really excited because everything up to that point that we had discovered was stuff that women, it felt like was stuff that women had to fix. That it was stuff that we had to learn how to do better to navigate in the existing male environment. And I didn't love that that was the case. And I didn't love that that was necessarily the point that we were making with a lot of these competencies. I really struggled with the fact that we were just telling women, hey, here's what men do better than us. And if we want to succeed, we have to do it like them. That doesn't really sit well with me. And so when we stumbled upon this theme of intuition, where we had all of these women talking about trusting their gut, all of these women about listening to their heart, listening to their inner voice, following their heart, it really became an important piece for us to shine some light on. Because this is something women are inherently, naturally better at. That may be societal conditioning, that may be scientific things in the brain. I really don't know. That's not my area of expertise. But what I believe is that women are inherently better at this. And that this is something that business, government, education, all of these places need more of, instead of just looking at facts and data and logic, but really weighing some of those external, unconscious clues that we are getting in those conversations and in that decision-making process that maybe our male counterparts aren't picking up on. And I think that that's what's really cool about intuition, is that we don't have to fix ourselves. We don't have to change. We have to bring that piece of ourselves back to the surface. Because what society has taught women is to squash that piece of us. That if you talk about, my gut says this, and that it doesn't align with the data that everybody's looking at, they're going to think you're crazy. And so women are taught to suppress this intuition. We're taught to suppress this inner voice and what our gut is telling us in situations where we're making really important decisions, especially. And what I am telling you right now is that where we have the ability to bring immense value to the world is when we let that intuition come back to the surface. And we use those pieces more often in our decision-making process. That we stop just looking at the data and the facts and the reports and the statistics and the financial data and the profit and loss statements and all of that stuff. That we listen to our gut too. And that we weigh those things, if not equally, at least we bring those to the surface. And I think that that's where we can bring immense value as women who work for men, as women who are in decision-making rooms, and as women who are leading teams, leading companies, and leading organizations, where we have to start to weigh that stuff and where we have to let that stuff speak more in the decision-making conversations that we're having. That for me was the piece that was unexpected about the research, but really exciting about the research, is that there's something that is inherent in women that we need to do a better job of using in our day-to-day work and using in our conversations and decision-making, and that stuff adds tremendous value in the work that we do. And so, we'll dig in a lot more in the master's class about how do you employ strategies to harness your intuition better in the workplace. But for now, we'll take any questions you might have. If not, we'll see you next week as we talk about communication. The next two competencies are sort of interlocked with each other. They're communication and relationships. But they have a little bit of a different twist that I want to make sure that we cover. So we're really excited to talk about the last two competencies. Don't forget that we have registration open for the Ladies Leading Masterclass that is starting on March 10th. And you can learn more at ladies-leading.com/masterclass. It is intended for early to mid-career women who are really looking to strengthen their competencies, these competencies in their own leadership abilities as they want to take on new responsibility, look for a new opportunity, whatever it may be. So you can learn more at our website, ladies-leading.com/masterclass. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week as we talk about another competency.